I knew some people would hate it. I had so many comments saying, "You'll never win this game, no matter how I slice it. You're cooked." And I guess they didn't realize that I was the one that was going to cook that game.
Ladies and gentlemen, here we are with the now US Catan champion.
Hello. Good to see you, and I appreciate you inviting me on, man. I'm looking forward to this.
I think we can start at the beginning. Like, how and when did you get introduced into Catan, and like what attracted you to it?
There's kind of two origin stories with this. The first one, I actually played my first Catan game. This would have been back in 2016. So a friend invited me over to the house. We were kind of doing with a couple different friends. And then, somebody randomly pulls out Catan and the game starts. Pretty sure I lost that game. Didn't know what I was doing. First game ever. Probably was like halfway intoxicated, which, okay, whatever. I didn't actually pick up the game until about 4 or 5 years after that point. We had a game night with friends. We played actually the Game of Thrones version, which has like a whole other expansion to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a little bit more plugged in. Maybe didn't have as many drinks this time. And coming out of that loss, I really wanted to figure out a little bit more of the dynamics, see if I can learn some of the strategies. So from there, I went online. And that's kind of where you get into the strategic rabbit hole. I found Delighted. And then pretty soon after that, I transitioned to Colonist. And really, as far as like my online play, over the last 3 years, I really haven't looked back and really appreciate what you guys have done. So that's kind of the short of it. Obviously, there's a lot of things that have happened over the last 3 years in particular, but I would say it's been pretty heavily Colonist focused. And obviously, you guys have done a lot of great work as far as developing the game, the UI. All the Discords are using your platform as well, which has been a big part of my journey. So,
You ever had any other strategy games that you liked? Because I know you're into chess.
Yeah, so chess has always been kind of like a love for me. I started playing that probably was like 10 years old. At the beginning of COVID, I got really back into chess and I had a lot of big ambitions to get good at it. I was just getting kind of like this really inquisitive learning space. We were all stuck indoors. So I was definitely a product of that. Kind of saying, well, I'm stuck here, don't know what to do. Maybe I'll just try to figure out this game. And I really fell in love with it quickly.
Now, maybe, do you want to paint us a picture of what your sort of trajectory as a whole looked like through milestones, maybe like what points?
Playing in the Discords and playing in the weekend tournaments with Catan community. I actually won my first ever online tournament that I played in.
Oh, interesting.
First time, I had no clue what I was doing, ended up winning it. I think there's probably like 60 or 70 people. And then there's also kind of like the longer form tournament play, like the leagues. So playing there in the Catan Championship League, I spent 14 seasons, so every month is a season. I pretty much spent about a year and a half, and then I finally got the D1 championship with them. This year was a little bit simpler. I did one tournament, won it 4-0, and then obviously USA Nationals just won that recently. So it's a lot of interesting wins along the way, playing in different communities, different arenas.
Yeah, I have seen some of your latest games on Discord, I guess, as you were practicing for Nationals, and there was still like a lot of very interesting table talk. Through voice call, which I thought was super interesting to watch.
I mean, look, table talk is just a huge part of the game. It's a very social game. And the players that are going to succeed at the highest level have to at least appreciate it. You don't have to do it all the time. A lot of players who do it are a little bit overly aggressive and not nuanced enough to make it successful. But it's a huge part of the game. And I think, if you watch like my Nationals performance, if I stayed quiet during that game, there's pretty sure to be a 0 chance I won. So I definitely contribute the way I communicate with people, success overall.
Yeah. It is super interesting to watch you do it. And this I'm actually pretty curious about. Do you think your career as a competitive player and your content creator career are sort of like, do they generate friction or are they synergic? Does one help the other or does it make it harder? Because I know like sometimes you have to play with alts so that you won't get like super targeted in games, right? So what's the relationship there?
Well, the online rank side, I think that's quite synergistic with the content. I mean, that's really where most Catan content is being done, is ranked online. Where it's become kind of challenging for me is playing in the Discords. So, and before I started my channel, most people don't know this, but I left the Discords essentially. Like, I decided to go on to do content more or less full time as far as Catan was concerned. I left the Discords as one of the best players. Like, I was like the best player in the leagues. I didn't really realize it at the time. The consequence of doing the content would take me away from that, but it did. So like kind of post, when you look at when I started my channel, I stopped playing the leagues, just more of a function of my time and energy. Yeah, it's like anything else in life. Everything has a cost to it. And you just have to realize, like, if I'm going to be doing content, I'm probably going to be giving up something else.
Right.
So, yeah, me playing the leagues essentially shifted to me playing online and playing in the ranked lobbies and doing more lesson style content. But I'm okay with that too, because to me, that's been part of my journey, and I have no regrets about it.
How does you being so well known in the community affect, like, did you notice people were targeting you extra? Was there any sort of that dynamic going on, or?
No, not really, which was actually really nice. Got recognized. There's no doubt about it. There's also there's a certain air in the tournament where someone's kind of talkative. So there wasn't any like, oh, it's DandyDrew, we got to block him, or, oh, he's a famous Catan user or anything. So yeah, I was actually pleasantly surprised about that. I mean, but there was definitely people at the tables that mentioned after the game like they knew me. But at the same time, you know, a good game of Catan is still good.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody was going to tank their game just to take me down. So yeah, it was actually that was the biggest thing I was concerned about going to that competition. I was like, I have all the skill in the world, but if I'm going to be overly targeted, that's pretty difficult to deal with. So
Interesting. Yeah, because I watched your video and that felt like a pretty fair like concern to have. Like if people know you, are they going to target you even a little more? Even if it's just like an implicit, you know, like a subconscious bias. Like you've seen this guy win so much stuff. Do you want to maybe take us through like you did before, like maybe the milestones of the tournament itself, highlights, just like briefly?
yeah, so it's essentially a 3-day event for me. So I got there on the Friday. You know, that night's all about just kind of getting settled in, resting, because the next 2 days, well, ideally 2 days, I mean, it might be one day for some people, but the next 2 days are just going to be Catan, more or less 6 hours. So on the Saturday, the next day, we wake up and you play 4 qualifying games. Each game's going to be anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. So it's a mega full day. And I think everyone, like, mentally, you know, you just kind of show up and say, like, I'm going to just put on my running shoes and run for it. First game, I got 7 points, which was brutal because in those kind of tournaments, really every point matters. Like, if you have a 6-point game in your first game, you have to literally win the next 3 games in a row to get playoffs.
Just for someone that doesn't know, like, these qualifiers, they go by adding your points every game, right?
So the first thing they take is the total wins. So, and then because there's so many players, they're going to have to differentiate points as well.
Right.
So you need a total of minimum 36 points, which means like 10, like 7 and 9. That would be an example of a player that can make top 16. But even
so you were pretty like
exactly. I had only 2 scenarios where I win the next 3 games in a row, which is like, okay, that sucks. Or I win 2, have to, and then get a 9 point on the next game. And that would be 36 points. Even then, there were players who got 36 points and still didn't make top 16 because there's other factors that are involved, like your VP percentage and things like that. I have really good games. I ended up 7 points on the first one. Then I won the next 2, which was like, you know, had to do it. And then I squeaked by with 9 points on the last game. So right there was my 36 points.
There it was.
That was day 1, right? So I made it. I got a good night's sleep, didn't stay out too late. And then we go into day 2, which is the playoffs. So first game started around 10 o'clock in the morning, which, you know, I typically don't like playing Catan that early, but whatever. We'll do what we have to do. And I was 4th position. So because I was one of the lower seeds on the top 16, I didn't get to choose my position. I was just like, whatever I got, I got. The ability for them games to balance out and be more fair, it's much greater in person, right? The communication aspect, people's, you know, you don't want to see a player dying in the corner, like in dead last place, like, keep the board alive. So in a sense, like, it's hard to get a horrible position, but yeah, you would like to have more options than just being given the scraps of 4th sometimes.
Yeah. But we talked about that in the lesson you gave me, how pacing varies a lot depending on whether you're playing online or over the board.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a real thing. And with this tournament, I've learned to appreciate a lot more. Get a really nice kind of under the radar or eat sheep. And my first 3 development cards in the first like 3 to 4 orbits was 3 VPs. Oh God. Okay. I'm not pulling knights. I need knights to get army. Didn't get them. And it was an interesting game because the game was bouncing out. People were dropping cities. And the short of it, even though I didn't get army, I dropped 2 cities and a settle, which
that's crazy.
Pretty rare to pull 5 VPs, but okay. I had to do it. in a USA Nationals semis. No big deal. No.
Was it 5 VPs, 5 development cards, or was it did you pull more cards?
One night, 5 VPs.
Wow, that's crazy.
So yeah, night was actually perfect because my first 3 devs were VPs, and then the 4th pull was the night. And then what happened is as soon as I pulled that 4th dev that night, they solo blocked me, and then I played the night, and they assumed I had more nights. So the timing of pulling that 4th dev being the night concealed the fact that I didn't have other nights.
You had that many non-nights, yeah.
Yeah,
wow.
So
very interesting.
Weird dynamic. But eventually they realized when I got blocked. Okay, Drew's not flipping a night. What the hell does this guy have? But it was funny because when I finally had the win, I just slowly flipped over each individual VP, and there was kind of no words that were said for like 10, 15 seconds. It was just like pure silence, staring at each other, shaking our heads because what do you do, right? Like somebody just pulled Exodia out of the development card deck. Yeah. That was my semis. A normal game for me, apparently.
So wait, after the qualifiers, there's just semifinals and sudden death? Or
yeah, and then the finals. But I mean, like you have to understand, you're playing 4 games in the qualifier, but there's 130 players playing.
Right.
So it goes from 130 down to 16.
I've done it before, but maybe for people who don't know, to get to nationals, you have to have played some qualifiers too, right?
Yeah, we even talk about that. So the way it works is there's 2 levels. You have a regional level, which are these smaller tournaments that happen all around your country. In order to get to nationals, you have to win a regional tournament, which usually consists of anywhere from 12 to 25 people. And there are some larger tournaments that have upwards to 60 to 80 people. But because I live here in the South, Florida, we have a lot more smaller tournaments, which I prefer. I think they're easier to qualify. Like, I'd rather beat out 11 people than have to beat out 60 people. But whatever, sometimes your geographical limitations are what they are. Because it's a smaller tournament, they do 3 qualifying games, and it goes straight into a finals. So I won all 4 of my games in Florida, went to nationals, played the 4 qualifying, got to the semis, won that, and then here we are in the finals. When I got to the final table, I was 4th again, essentially. But the way it works is everyone goes around the table and says which position do they want to play. So the guy that was 1st seed he went 2nd, which is like, okay, you gave up 1st. Interesting. The guy that was 2nd went 4th. It's like, oh. And then the guy that was 3rd took 3rd. And then I got pushed in the 1st. So I went from 4th pick to 1st pick, which is actually very rare.
Do you think that's like very board dependent? Do you think?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, everyone essentially takes, pretty much as much time as they need to review the board and decide. Was 2nd apparently felt 4th was a better option for him than 1st. And that gentleman, by the way, was Shazzy, who I said, he just has a creative, interesting way he looks at Catan boards. So he saw something that he liked no matter what, which was cool to see. I haven't talked to him yet about it, but I'm looking forward to that conversation. So I was 1st on that board, and it was a tough board. I wasn't thrilled about it, but there was one pick that I think most people would take on there, which was the 6-4-10. So it's just a straight up or wheat sheet pick. I felt that was playable. I could have done that. I could have bought development cards, but when you're dealing with a board that will be balanced no matter what, right? All these players are extremely strong. Their communication skills are really good. I went for a different strategy, which was I wanted to give me a pick that gave me a different imbalance where, okay, I'm not playing over sheep, but I can take a rare resource, which would have been the 8-5-4, the wheat situation, and then use that trading resource to get value as I'm playing the game. So that's one of the reasons I took the 8-5-4. I knew some people would hate it. I had so many comments saying, you'll never win this game, no matter how I slice it. You're cooked. And I guess they didn't realize that I was the one that was going to cook that game. So it's levels to it. I think there's a lot to be said about having a good plan and having the right kind of board vision to make a play like that. And not everyone should take that pick, but for me, I'm an extremely strong trader and communicator. I couldn't win that setup on just the setup alone, if that makes sense. Like if I just sat there quietly and let the dice rolls happen, I would lose the game. So what made the difference for me was the amount that I traded and my communication skills, which was the whole point of the setup in the first place. So little things, me building the first city with no war, that was not an accident. I mean, that was something I was intentionally doing because usually when you're playing a strong port setup, you need that city early on to counterbalance the fact that you don't have as many rolls or as many numbers. So little things like that. There's a ton of different nuanced moments where I'm trading. I'm getting value in the right way. So maybe getting a resource plus a non-block with that. And then there's a moment that was very interesting and subtle where I 7'd out. I had a monster hand. I had 12 cards. Had to get rid of 6, which is so brutal with my setup. And there was actually a silent extortion deal that happened where somebody said, I know what you're looking for. I can help you. And I know he was referring to helping me with an ore trade. So instead of blocking him, I said, are you saying what I think you're saying? He nodded his he nodded his head. And we actually...
Wait, is that allowed?
Yeah. We didn't discuss any cards. And I kind of took the hint and said, like, I see what you're saying. So we actually...
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah, so we actually did an extortion deal without talking about cards or anything. But that play coming out... So I had 6 cards in hand. I had a settlement and a wheat and sheep. The deal was for an ore. So I had a settlement in hand, and then once I did the extortion with him, I had a development card. I settled and then pulled a VP in that one turn. So I turned an absolute brutal 7 into a 2-point play just by these like little cool strategic nuances of playing in person.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Like, the extortion is so fun.
I think my attitude going to this tournament has definitely improved. Like I've said before, I've always been kind of known to be an aggressive player. But I wanted to bring a lot more good vibes with this tournament. I wanted to be a lot more social, likable, somebody that others want to work with. So that was definitely a big part of the success for me. But also, I didn't give up, even though I had a tough position. I think that willingness to always stay in the game, always keep looking for value, looking for deals, always fighting to the bitter end. At no point, though I did feel I was behind, I never felt like I was losing, if that makes sense. And I think that mentality is good when you're playing Catan at any level. Like, if you want to win more games, it almost starts from a mentality perspective than it does anything else. So I think that's one aspect that I did really, really well, and I think it was a big reason I won the whole thing. Look, if there's anybody that's lost their mental state playing this game, it's probably been me. I totally understand that. But I also think, like, the ability to kind of get back into the game and take a look in the mirror and be like, is that attitude serving me well? Is it helping me win more games? Am I enjoying the process more because of it? You should have an honest conversation, right? Because like most people know deep down, like it doesn't feel good when you're raging and you're being toxic. The scene's in a good place. I think we have so many good things going on. Also, too, like I'm super excited for Catan Studios. I mean, it's just, at least from my point of view, I think there's so much opportunity for this space to grow. But then again, like, it's going to rely on all these key players, and Colonist being one of them, to keep doing what they're doing. I got no complaints. Let's put it that way.